All right. Okay, guys, you can begin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bisu. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the MGPS class. I am Stefan Theophilus, along with Karen Charles and Juma Cox. And today we'll be going into chapter 12 on leadership, power, and influence, taken from the leadership experience by R.L. DAFT. This chapter explores the topic of leadership, power, and influence in detail. The chapter opens with a discussion in the realms of transformational and charismatic leadership, two leadership styles that rely strongly on leaders' personal characteristics as a source of power. We next examine the terms power and influence, take an in-depth look at some sources of leader power and types of power, and outline ways leaders exercise power and influence through political activity. Finally, we will briefly consider some tactics for asserting leader influence aspects. So I will now hand you over to Karen Charles. But before I do so, I would ask if you all please have a piece of paper on standby along with some sort of writing apparatus, because you all will have a short questionnaire to do shortly. Much appreciated. So Karen, take it away.
All right, thank you, Stefan, for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, class. Good afternoon, Mr. Bisun. Presently, I am going to deal with transformational and charismatic leadership. So transformational leadership is defined as a leadership approach that causes change in individuals and social systems. Charismatic leadership is defined by a leader who uses his or her communication skills, persuasiveness, and charm to influence others. Charismatic leadership is also described to people who have an outgoing, energetic, and likable personality that seems to naturally draw other people to them. So therefore, transformational and charismatic leadership have been a great interest to researchers. One of the key characteristics of both charismatic and transformational leadership is that they are based largely on the strength of a leader's personal power rather than on a position of authority granted by an organization. So now we're going to look at transformational versus transactional leadership. So transformational leadership typically has a substantial impact on followers and can potentially renew an entire organization. One way to understand transformational leadership is to compare it to transactional leadership. The basis of transactional leadership is a transaction or exchange process between leaders and followers. The transactional leader recognizes followers' needs and desires and then clarifies how those needs and desires will be satisfied in exchange for meeting specified objectives or performing certain duties. Thus, followers receive rewards for job performance, whereas leaders benefit from the completion of tasks. Transactional leaders focus on the present and excel at keeping the organization running smoothly and efficiently. They are good at traditional management functions such as planning and budgeting, and generally focus on the interpersonal aspect of job performance. Transactional leadership can be quite effective. By clarifying expectations, leaders help build followers' confidence. In addition, satisfying the needs of subordinates may improve productivity and morale. However, because transactional leadership involves a commitment to follow the rules, transactional leaders maintain stability within the organization rather than promoting change. Transactional skills are important for all leaders. However, in today's world, in which organizational success often depends on continuous change, effective leaders also use a different approach. Transformational leadership now is characterized by the ability to bring out significant change in both followers and the organization. So transformational leaders has the ability to lead changes in an organization's vision, strategy, and culture, as well as promote innovation in product and technologies. Rather than analyzing and controlling specific transactions with followers using rules, directions, and incentives, transformational leadership focuses on intangible qualities such as vision, shared values, and ideas in order to build relationships, give larger meaning to separate activities, and provide common ground to enlist followers in the change process. Transformational leadership is based on the personal value beliefs and qualities of the leader rather than on an exchange process between leader and followers. Recent studies support the idea that transformational leadership has a positive impact on followers' development and follower performance. Moreover, transformational leadership skills can be learned and are not ingrained personality characteristics. However, some personality traits make it easier for leaders to display transformational leadership behaviors. For example, studies of transformational leaders have found that the trait of agreeableness is described in chapter 4 of this text is positively associated with transformational leadership. In addition, transformational leaders are typically emotionally stable, and positively engaged with the world around them, and they have a strong ability to recognize and understand others' emotions. This is not surprising considering that these leaders accomplish change by building networks of positive relationships. So we are going to look at transformational leadership, how they differ from transactional leadership in 4 significant areas. The first area, transformational leadership develops followers into leaders. Followers are given greater freedom to control their own behavior. So therefore, a transformational leader rallies people around a mission and vision and defines the boundaries within which followers can operate in relative freedom to accomplish organization goals. The transformational leader arouses his or her followers on the awareness of problems and issues and helps people to look at things in a new ways so that productive change can happen. Secondly, transformational leadership evaluates the concern of followers from lower level physical needs to higher level psychological needs and self-actualization. It is important that lower level needs are met through adequate wages, safe working conditions, and other considerations. However, the transformational leader also pays attention to each individual's needs for growth and development. Therefore, the leader sets examples and assigns tasks not only to meet immediate needs, but also to elevate followers' needs and abilities to a higher level and link them to the organization's mission. Transformational leaders change followers so that they are empowered to change the organization. Thirdly, transformational leadership inspires followers to go beyond their own self-interest for the good of the group. So transformational leaders motivate people to do more than originally expected. They make followers aware of the importance of changing goals and outcomes, and in turn enable them to transcend their own immediate interests for the sake of the organizational mission. Followers admire these leaders, want to identify with them, and have a high degree of trust in them. However, transformational leadership motivates people not just to follow the leader personally, but to believe in the need for change and willing to make personal sacrifices for the greater purpose. Fourth and lastly, transformational leadership paints a vision of a desired future state and communicates it in a way that makes the pain of change worth the effort. So the most significant role of the transformational leader may be to find a vision for the organization that is significantly better than the old one to enlist others in sharing the dream. It is the vision that launches people into action and provides the basis for the other aspects of transformational leadership. Change can occur only when people have sensed a purpose as well as a desirable picture where the organization is going. Without vision, there can be no transformation. So I now hand you over to my colleague, Stefan Theophilus, to deal with an activity with you guys.
Thank you, CRN. So take a stretch, reach for your pen, pencil, your paper. We just have a nice short multi-factor leadership questionnaire that would best show if you are a leader in the manner of which we are speaking. So this form was created by B. Bass and B. Avolio. And as we said, it's a multi-factor leadership questionnaire. It has 12 questions that analyze your leader in a way to understand the transformational leadership concepts and how would you rate the dimensions of developing followers into leaders or inspiring followers to be beyond their own self-interest. So simply put, I need you to think of a situation where someone, a boss, coach, teacher, one person in particular within your work life, school life, whichever one, where they have a leadership position over you. Now, the questions are designed to indicate whether each item below are mostly false or mostly true with regards to the leader over you. So what I need for you all to do, for question 1, you simply put in question 1, and next to that you would put true or false. Question 2, true or false, and so on. So here we go for question number 1. Your leader listens carefully to your concerns. True or false? Number 2, your leader showed conviction in his or her values. True or false? I do hope everyone does not get 12 false responses. I know the organization we're in now. Number 3, your leader helps you focus on developing your strengths. True or false? Number 4, your leader is always enthusiastic about the mission. True or false? Number 5, your leader provides you with coaching advice for your development. True or false? Number 6, your leader talks optimistically about the future. True or false? Halfway there. Number 7, your leader encourages your self-development. True or false? Number 8, your leader fosters a clear understanding of important values and beliefs. True or false? Number 9, your leader provides feedback on how you were doing. True or false? Number 10, your leader inspires you with his or her plans for the future. Number 11, your leader teaches you how to develop your abilities. True or false? And last but not least, number 12, your leader gains others' commitment to his or her dreams. Your leader gains others' commitment to his or her dreams. True or false? Now, with regards to the scoring and interpretation of this questionnaire, these questions simply represent two dimensions of transformational leadership. For the dimension of developing followers into leaders, the sum for mostly true questions should be true, number 1, number 3, number 5, number 7, 9, and 11, which is all the odd numbers. So this is if your leader is developing their followers into leaders as well. For the dimension that inspires followers to go beyond their own self-interest, the answers that would reign mostly true would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12, all the even numbers. And this is for, as I said, the leader that inspires followers to go beyond their own self-interest. Now, hopefully, most of you all got at least, 5 and above in either dimension. 5 and above would be considered high because many leaders do not practice transformational skills in their leadership or group work. For those of you all who would have scored 2 or below, that would simply be average. Now, simply put, this questionnaire, I needed to remember, it's not really about your leaders per se, but it's more about you as a leader. So it's about more or less self-reflection. So the important learning from this exercise is really about yourself and not your leader. Analyzing your leader was simply a way to understand the transformational leadership concepts. How would you rate on the dimensions of developing followers into leaders or inspiring followers to go beyond their own self-interest? So I don't know if any one of you all would like to share if any of you got 5 and above in any of the dimensions with regards to the leaders that are above you. And of course, anybody could share who would have gotten 2 and below. Anyone got 5 and above with regards to the leader that's above you?
Yeah, Theo, concerning the answers that's supposed to be false, yeah, my score was 5 exact.
5 exact.
Yeah.
So that is false.
Yes.
Yeah, so that will make them average. Yeah, that will make them average. Once they don't score, once they score 2, so in the flip side, that would have them as 2 or less than 2 with regards to true, correct?
Yeah, 2.
Right.
Exactly.
So that would mean that they have not an ounce of transformational blood flowing within their bodies, unfortunately. Or as the book would say, average, but they're playing it nice. Right? It does go. So that being said, from the silence that I heard, I believe, well, that's no one then would have a leader over them that would have 5 and above. Point to note, the test is about you. So everybody analyze yourself, do some introspective with regards to your transformational leadership skills. So I'll hand you back over now to Karen, who will continue with the presentation.
I thank you again, Theo. And what a lovely introspective there. Great. So we are continuing with transactional and transformational leadership. So both transactional and transformational leadership patterns accentuate not only the abilities to build a vision and empower and energize others, but also the transactional skills of designing structures, control systems, and reward systems that can help people achieve the mission. For example, one leader who reflects a balance of transactional and transformational leadership is our late Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams, with regards to our road towards independence. All right. So I now give you let's watch a little video on a transformational leader.
Transformational leadership is a very effective style of leadership, and decades of leadership research has shown that it leads to a wide variety of positive outcomes. Followers of transformational leaders are motivated, engaged, satisfied, have positive attitudes, experience less stress and burnout, and perform at higher than expected levels. In order to be a transformational leader, one is required to perform behaviors that fall roughly into 4 broad categories. The first category, which is called idealized influence, includes behaviors that involve becoming a strong role model for your followers or your subordinates. You can become a strong role model by working very hard and by setting a positive example for everyone around you. If your followers see you working conscientiously and diligently day in and day out, odds are that they will begin to respect you and admire you. A second way by which you can become a strong role model is by being uncompromisingly ethical. Through your words, you can communicate to your followers that you have high moral and ethical standards. And through your actions, you can communicate that you stick to your high moral and ethical standards even when the going gets tough. A third way would be to emphasize to your followers the importance of having a common mission and make self-sacrifices to help your followers to realize that mission. Enacting such behaviors will earn their respect, and they will want to identify with you and with what you stand for. The second category of behaviors is called inspirational motivation. It involves developing a promising vision for the future and then clearly communicating that vision to your followers through the use of inspiring stories, vivid imagery, and captivating symbols. It also includes making emotional appeals to your followers and urging them to work harder and go above and beyond their roles and responsibilities in the pursuit of this shared vision. Such appeals, especially if made by someone that they greatly respect and admire, often result in a high level of commitment and performance. The third category of behaviors is called intellectual stimulation. It includes encouraging followers to look at day-to-day problems from different perspectives and allowing them to come up with creative solutions to those problems. It also involves supporting your subordinates as they think outside the box and try new methods to solve existing problems. This might mean that you might have to have a certain amount of tolerance for mistakes that are made in the process, because thinking outside the box and developing creative solutions can sometimes backfire. A good transformational leader does not let the fear of mistakes constrain the creativity of his or her subordinates and provides them with a supportive environment where they can take calculated risks. The fourth and final category of behaviors is called individualized consideration. This includes coaching and helping your followers to achieve their goals. It also involves providing a supportive climate and carefully listening to their needs so that you can help them to fulfill those needs. The type of coaching that you can offer your followers may vary depending upon who is in need of help. For some followers, you might have to provide explicit guidance regarding how to get a job done, while for some others, you might have to offer them the resources that they need and let them figure out the solution on their own. These are the 4 types of behaviors which, if you perform consistently, will make you a transformational leader that people respect and admire. And as noted previously, decades of research has shown that being a transformational leader pays huge dividends.
All right, so now we are going to look at charismatic leadership. So charismatic leaders are persons who have the ability to inspire and motivate people to do more than they would normally do, despite obstacles and personal sacrifice. As a leader, you can use aspects of charismatic leadership by articulating a vision, making personal sacrifices to help achieve it, and appealing to people's emotions more than to their minds. Expand your charismatic potential by pursuing activities that you genuinely love. Many transformational leaders have charisma, a seemingly innate ability to inspire enthusiasm, interest, and affection from followers. However, charismatic leadership typically instills both awe and submission in followers, whereas transformational leadership seeks to increase the engagement of followers. Charisma has been called a fire that ignites followers, energy and commitment, producing results above and beyond the call of duty. Charismatic leaders have an emotional impact on people because they appeal to both the heart and the mind. They may speak emotionally about putting themselves on the line for the sake of a mission, and they are perceived as people who persist in spite of great odds against them. Charismatic leaders often emerge in troubled times, whether in society or in organizations, because a strong, inspiring personality can help to reduce stress and anxiety among followers. For example, Imam Yassin Abu Bakr staged their 1990 attempted coup based on the oppression of the people during at that time. As for organizational example, Tuber Buzz Butler, who brought about the labor unions, as a result instigated the governments to implement an Industrial Relations Act. Charismatic leaders who have the ability to inspire and motivate people to do more than they would normally do, despite obstacles and personal sacrifice. Although charisma itself cannot be learned, there are aspects of charismatic leadership that anyone can use. For one thing, charisma comes from pursuing activities that you have a true passion for. Charismatic leaders are engaging their own emotions in an everyday work life, which makes them energetic and enthusiastic and attractive to others. Their passion galvanizes people to action. What makes a charismatic leader? Understanding charismatic leadership qualities and behavior can help anyone become a stronger leader. A number of studies have identified the unique qualities of charismatic leaders, documented the impact they have on followers, and described the behavior that help them achieve remarkable results. Some distinguishing characteristics of charismatic and non-charismatic leaders are as follows. The first characteristic, a charismatic leader is likable, has likableness. The non-charismatic leader shares perspective, makes a leader likable. A charismatic leader shares perspective and it idealizes the vision, makes the leader likable, an honorable hero worthy of identification and imitation. The next characteristic is trustworthiness. The non-charismatic leader, disinterested advocacy in pursuing attempts. The charismatic leader is passionate for advocacy by incurring great personal risk and cost. The next characteristic is relationship to the status quo. The non-charismatic leader tries to maintain the status quo with limited goals not too discrepant from the status quo. The charismatic leader creates an atmosphere of change, idealized with a vision that is highly discrepant from the status quo. Articulation is the next characteristic, where the non-charismatic leader is weak with articulation of goals and motivation to lead, whereas the charismatic leader is strong and inspirational articulation of vision and motivation to lead. Competence is the next characteristic, where the non-charismatic leader uses available means to achieve goals within the framework of the existing order, whilst the charismatic leader uses unconventional means to transcend the existing order. Behavior is the next characteristic. The non-charismatic leader is conventional, conforms to the norms, whereas the charismatic leader is unconventional and is counter-normative. And lastly, the last characteristic is influence. The non-charismatic leader is primarily authority of position and rewards, whereas the charismatic leader transcends position. Personal power is based on expertise and respect and admiration for the leader. All right, on this slide, before we start, can any one of the members in the class, anyone tell me if they recognize any one of the persons on that slide? Nobody?
Yes, yes, I do.
Who do you, all right, Jason, tell me who you recognize.
Right, I recognize the great Silver Fox.
That's the old Silver Fox Basdio Pandey. Right,
Okay.
very good. As well as we all patriarch Patrick Manning and
Yes.
Uriah Buzz Butler, followed by Abu Bakr and old famous Jim Jones.
Right.
Right. So one characteristics of charisma is noted by most researchers that can be a curse as well as a blessing. Leaders such as Basdio Pandey, the old Silver Fox, Patrick Manning, and Uriah Buzz Butler had tremendous charisma. So did leaders such as Imam Yassin Abu Bakr and Jim Jones. Charisma isn't always used to benefit the group, organization, or society. It can also be used for self-serving purposes, which leads to deception, manipulation, and exploitation of others. Because the basis of charisma is emotional rather than logical or rational, it is risky and potentially dangerous. One explanation for the distinction between charisma that results in positive outcomes and that results in negative outcomes relates to the difference between personalized leaders and socialized leaders. Leaders who react to organizational problems in terms of their own needs rather than the needs of the whole often act in ways that can have disastrous consequences for others. Personalized charismatic leaders are characterized as self-aggrandizing, non-egalitarian, and exploitive, whereas socialized charismatic leaders are empowering, egalitarian, and supportive. Personalized behavior is based on caring about self, and socialized behavior is based on valuing others. Studies have shown that personalized charismatic leaders can have a significant detrimental impact on long-term organizational performance. Leaders who have been consistently successful in improving organizational performance show a pattern of socialized behavior. I'll now hand you over to Stefan again to have another activity for you guys.
So right, we are back with our pens, pencils, paper, and the question is, do you think you have charisma? And not the type of charisma where the significant other will bamboozle you and teeth your head and make you feel oh so sweet. Talking about the charismatic leadership type of charisma, where you could get the persons under your charge to give their best for you. So that being said, a leadership expert, Mr. J. Conger, assisted in making a short quiz with 10 questions that will help you determine whether you have characteristics that are associated with charismatic leaders. The questions are as follows. So just to reiterate, the same procedure as the last time. You write down number one, but this time you simply have to choose A or B. So number one, I give you two answers. You choose either A or B, and so we continue. So number one, you are most comfortable thinking in A, generalities, B, specifics. Again, you are most comfortable in thinking in A, generalities, B, specifics. Question two, you worry most about A, current competitive issues, or B, future competitive issues. You worry most about A, current competitive issues, or B, future competitive issues. Question three, you tend to focus on A, the opportunities you've missed, or B, the opportunities you've seized. Again, you tend to focus on A, the opportunities you've missed, or B, the opportunities you've seized. Number four, you prefer to A, promote traditions and procedures that have led to success in the past, or B, suggest new and unique ways of doing things. You prefer to A, promote traditions and procedures that have led to success in the past, or B, suggest new and unique ways of doing things. Number 5, you tend to ask A, how can we do this better? Or B, why are we doing this? You tend to ask A, how can we do this better? Or B, why are we doing this? Question 6, you believe A, there's always a way to minimize risk. Or B, some risks are too high. You believe A, there's always a way to minimize risk. Or B, some risks are too high. Number 7, you tend to persuade people by using A, emotion, B, logic. You tend to persuade people by using A, emotion, B, logic. Number 8, you prefer to A, honor traditional values and ways of thinking, or B, promote unconventional beliefs and values. You prefer to A, honor traditional values and ways of thinking, or B, promote unconventional beliefs and values. Number 9, you would prefer to communicate via A, a written report, or B, a one-page chart. You would prefer to communicate via a written report, or B, a one-page chart. And finally, number 10, you think this quiz is A, ridiculous, or B, fascinating. You think this quiz is A, in local parlance, dotishness, or B, fascinating. So excellent. So even for this one, the scoring and interpretation is very simple. So now you could grade yourselves with regards to, because the following answers are associated with if you have the characteristics of a charismatic leader. So for number 1, A. Number 2, B. Number 3, A. Number 4, B. Number 5, B. Number 6, A. Number 7, A. Number 8, B. Number 9, B. And number 10, B. Has anyone gotten all 10 of these questions in their favor and have the correct answers? Anyone at all?
Right, so the only one I get was the last one, number 10, which is B. That's the only one I get. Everything else.
Sorry to tell you. Sorry to tell you. You lack the let me make it simple with the everythingness of being a charismatic leader. But we are positive that you have your own leadership style. Positive about that.
All right.
You know where let's go. You know where let's go. So with regards to the general questions, if you have 7 or more of these questions, right, then you have a high charisma quotient. So if you have 6 and below, you more or less average your borderline. You have a little way to go still, you know. But good thing, charisma is something that could be learned. So it have anybody at all. Well, besides Dover will get 1 out of 10. Dover, that is probably the worst you ever score in an exam, I'm sure. Sure. So that being said, if you have answered this way to 4 of your questions, your charisma level is considered low. So what we do now, we will engage ourselves in a video with regards to charismatic leadership.
Another perspective that's been adopted by some leadership experts focuses on how leaders are seen through the eyes of followers. That is, in what ways and to what extent is it important that followers and other observers attribute leadership to others? The three primary approaches of leadership through the eyes of followers are transformational leadership, charismatic leadership, and attributions of leadership. Let's take a look at charismatic leadership. Perspective based on charismatic leadership assumed that charisma is an individual characteristic of the leader. Charisma is a form of interpersonal attraction that inspires support and acceptance. Charismatic leadership is accordingly a type of influence based on the leader's personal charisma. All else being equal, someone with charisma is more likely to be able to influence others than someone without. Robert House first proposed a theory of charismatic leadership based on research findings from a variety of social science disciplines. His theory suggests that charismatic leaders are likely to have a lot of self-confidence, firm confidence in their beliefs and ideals, and a strong need to influence people. They also tend to communicate high expectations about follower performance and to express confidence in their followers. This figure portrays the three elements of charismatic leadership in organizations that most experts acknowledge today. First, charismatic leaders are able to envision likely future trends and patterns, to set high expectations for themselves and for others, and to model behaviors consistent with meeting those expectations. Next, charismatic leaders are able to energize others by demonstrating personal excitement, personal confidence, and constant patterns of success. Finally, charismatic leaders enable others by supporting them, empathizing with them, and expressing confidence in them. The charismatic leader is characterized by these three fundamental attributes. As illustrated, these are behaviors resulting in envisioning, energizing, and enabling. Charismatic leaders can be a powerful force in any organizational setting.
So we now move on to power, influence, and leadership, which would be conducted by none other than Juma Cox. Juma.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you. Good day, sir. Good day, class. Right, I'll continue the presentation with power, influence, and leadership. Power is the ability of one person or department in an organization to influence other people to bring about a desired outcome. Influence is the effect a person action have on the attitude, value, belief, or action of others. Power. Power and influence are highly important concepts in the study of leadership. Leadership relies on the use of power to get things done. However, getting a grasp of the meaning of the term power and influence can be difficult. Power is an entangled force in an organization. It cannot be seen, but its effect can be felt. It is often defined as the potential ability of one person or department to influence others, personnel or department to carry out orders or to do something they otherwise would not have done. Other definitions stress that power is the ability of achieving goals or outcomes that power holders desire. The achievement of desired outcome is the basis of definition used here. It is the potential of influence others within the organization with the goals of attaining desired outcomes for power holders. Potential power is realized through the process of politics and influence. Sometimes the term power and influence are used simultaneously, but there are distinctions between the two. Basically, as mentioned above, influence is the effect of a person's action has changed on the attitude, belief, and action of others. Whereas power is the capacity to cause a change in a person's influence, may be true of a degree of actual change. For example, as a child, you may have experience of playing a game where you didn't want to play. However, one person in a group influenced you and others to play the game. Although we usually think of power and influence as belonging to leaders, in reality, they result from the interaction of leaders and followers in specific situations. As we learn in chapter 7 on fellowship, followers may also influence a leader's behavior in a number of ways, for better or for worse. Later in this chapter, we will examine how specific influence tactics that may be used to change another attitude and behavior. Leaders can improve their effectiveness by understanding the various types of sources of power and as well as influence tactics they are followed by the use. 5 types of leader power. Power is also described as a personal characteristic and as described above. Organizational position also influence a leader's power. Most discussion of power include 5 types that are available to leaders: legitimate, reward, coercive, expert, and reverent power. The first 3, legitimate, reward, and coercive power, may all be considered types of position power that are defined largely by the organization, policies, and procedures. A person's position in an organization defines what amount of power he or she has, particularly in regards to the ability to reward or to punish subordinates, to influence their behavior. However, it is important to remember that position power and leadership are not the same thing. As we discussed in chapter 1, a person might hold a formal position of authority and yet not be a leader. Effective leaders don't rely solely on formal position to influence others to accomplish goals. 2 sources of personal power called expert power and reverent power are based on the personal specialized knowledge and personal characteristics. I now show you a video on the 5 types of power.
Hello and welcome to another Cat Indian channel feature. This is part of MBA 101 Leadership section. In this video, we will explore different types of personal and formal power, including reward, coercive, legitimate, expert, and referent power. Power means many different things to different people. For some, power is seen as corrupt. For others, the more power they have, the more successful they feel. For even others, power is of no interest at all. The 5 bases of power were identified by John French and Bertram Raven in the early 1960s through a study they had conducted on power in leadership roles. The study showed how different types of power affected one's leadership ability and success in a leadership role. The 5 bases of power are divided into 2 categories: formal power and personal power. Let's first look at formal power. Formal power can be further categorized in coercive, reward, and legitimate power. Coercive power is conveyed through a fear of losing one's job, being demoted, receiving a poor performance review, having prime projects taken away. This power is gotten through threatening others. For example, remember the show where Donald Trump used to fire people if they were not able to complete the task? Next, we look at reward power. Reward power is conveyed through rewarding individuals for compliance with one's wishes. This may be done through giving bonuses, raises, a promotion, extra time off from work, etc. For example, if you watch my marketing videos, where I explain that I used to own a business called iHappy Novelties, and I used to pay commission to my workers once they reached the sales target. Legitimate power comes from having a position of power in an organization, such as being the boss or a key member of a leadership team. This power comes when employees in the organization recognize the authority of the individual. For example, the CEO, who determines the overall direction of the company and the resource needs of the company. Now let's explore personal power. Personal power can be further categorized into expert power and referent power. Expert power comes from one's experience, skills, or knowledge. As we gain experience in particular areas and become thought leaders in those areas, we begin to gather expert power that can be utilized to get others to help us meet our goals. For example, I went through a detailed course to get certified as a reliability engineer. I visit various companies as a consultant to coach them on reliability and analytics aspect of the business. Since I've gone through reliable experience and training, the companies that I give advice to ensures that they follow it. Referent power comes from being trusted and respected. We can gain referent power when others trust what we do and respect us for how we handle situations. For example, Elon Musk. I have a group of friends that work for Tesla, and they're amazed at the skills Elon Musk possesses. Elon's charisma and work ethics is imbibed by his followers. Now for the summary. As you can see, there are different types of power. I despise using definitions on my video because very rarely it helps in explaining something precisely. I will limit my rant about the
I'll now continue with a response to the use of power. Leaders use the various types of power to influence others to do what is necessary to accomplish organizational goal. The success of any attempt to influence is a matter of degree, but there are three distinct outcomes that may result from the use of power. They are compliance, resistance, and commitment. Here's another video that assists with the understanding of the use of power.
Let's take a look at a model of power and influence. Influence is the ability to affect the behavior of others in a particular direction, whereas power is the potential or capacity to influence. Leaders are influential only when they exercise power. A leader, therefore, must acquire power in order to influence others. The model shown here illustrates that the end results of a leader's influence, the outcomes, are a function of the tactics he or she uses. The influence tactics are in turn moderated or affected by the leader's traits, the leader's behaviors, and the situation. Looking at the right side of the model, there are three possible outcomes: commitment, compliance, and resistance. Commitment is the most successful outcome. The target of influence attempt is enthusiastic about carrying out the request and makes a full effort and is therefore fully engaged. Commitment is particularly important for complex, difficult tasks because these require full concentration and effort. If you're influencing a technician to upgrade your operating system software, you would need his or her commitment. Compliance means that the influence attempt is partially successful. The target person is apathetic, not overjoyed, about carrying out the request and makes only a modest effort. The influence agent has changed the person's behavior, but not his or her attitude. Compliance for routine tasks, such as wearing a hard hat on a construction site, is usually good enough. Resistance is an unsuccessful influence attempt. It includes making excuses for why the task cannot be carried out, procrastinating, and outright refusing to do the task. Going to the left side of the model, a leader's personality traits affect the outcome of influence tactics. An extroverted and warm leader who has charisma can more readily use the same influence tactics than a leader who is introverted and cold. The leader's behaviors also affect the outcome of influence tactics in a variety of ways.
Role of dependency. You probably know from a personal experience that when a person has control over something that others want and need, he or she gains power. A simple example, an employee dependent on her company for paycheck. Similarly, a company dependent on the employee for labor, skill, and brains. People in an organization has power because other people depend on them for information, resources, cooperation, and so forth. The more people depend on someone, the greater that person power. The nature of dependency relationship between leaders and subordinates in organization fluctuate depending on the economic circumstances. When unemployment is low and jobs are plentiful, people feel less dependent on their superiors, and managers are more dependent on employees because they are harder to replace. When jobs are hard and to come by and unemployment is high, organizational leaders has great power over employees because most people are dependent on organization for their livelihood. This type of dependency primarily affects a leader position power, which is based on formal authority and the ability to bestow reward and punishment. When supervisors are dependent on employees, such as in tight labor market, leaders must gain and exercise personal power to a great extent because people will often stay in a job where they are admired and respect. The leader, even if other opportunities are plentiful, when jobs are scarce, it is easy for leaders to get by relying on position power, but they won't get full benefits of employees' enthusiasm and commitment. The control of resources. Dependency within an organization control over resources. Dependency within an organization is related to personal control over resources. Resources include such things as job, rewards, financial support, expertise, knowledge and material, information, and time. People are more dependent, therefore, leaders and organizations have more control over power. When resources are high on three characteristics: importance, scarcity, and non-unsuitability. People in the organization must perceive the resource to be important. That is, if nobody wants what you got, it's not going to create dependency. Resources can be important for a variety of reasons. For example, they may be essential element of the key production. They may directly generate sales, or they might be critical to reducing or avoiding uncertainty for the organization top decision makers. Chief information officers has a greater and tremendous amount of power in many organizations because of the critical role of information technology from both business and non-profit organizations. Similarly, ethics and compliance officers are highly powerful today because they help reduce uncertainty for top leaders concerning ethical elapse and financial malfeasance. Scarcity refers to whether the resource is scarce or difficult to obtain. A resource that is difficult or expensive to acquire is more valuable and creates more dependence than one that is widely available. For example, in companies more towards e-business, some young internet manager has great power over senior leaders who has no computer experience. So true. The third characteristic is non-substitutability. Means that leaders or employees with control over resources with no valuable suitability will have more power. These resources may include knowledge and expertise as well as access to people with high power. The example of executive secretary that has daily access to the CEO might have more power than the middle management who must compete for a few minutes of the top leader's time. Resources loss of leader power in organizations. An understanding of dependency and control over resources provides the foundation for examining several sources of leader power in organization. 5 types of power were discussed earlier and derive from either formal or the leader personal qualities. These sources provide the basis for much of the leader's influence in organization. However, additional sources of power and influence has been identified. The strategic continuity theory identified power source not linked to the specific person or position, but the role the leader played in overall functioning of the organization. Sources of power in the regard are interdepartmental dependency, control over information, centrality, and coping with uncertainty. Firstly, interdepartmental dependency. One key resource of leader power many organizations is interdepartment dependency. Material resources and information may flow between departments in one direction. In such case, leaders in the department receive resources will have less power than those in the department that provide them. For example, consider the case of a leader in a cigarette factory. One might expect that the production department would have more power than the maintenance department, but this wasn't the case. The production of cigarette was a routine process. The machinery was automated. On the other hand, management department workers and their leader were responsible for repairing of the automated machinery, which was complex task, and they had many years of experience. Control over information. Despite the trend towards empowerment and broad information sharing, the fact remains that some people will almost always have some access to information more than others. Control over information, which involve both access to information and control over how and who it is distributed. It is an important source of power for leaders. For example, a project manager may have all the information for a specific project, and that will give him or her control over informational power. Most leaders recognize that information is a primary business resource and that by controlling what information is collected, how it is interpreted, and how and who is shared too, they can influence how decisions are made. However, control over information can also be a source of power for lower level leaders and employees. Employees who have access to information needed by leaders to make decisions gain power as a result. For example, top executive may be dependent on the production manager for analyzing and interpreting complex operation data. Next, organizational centrality. Leaders or department roles in the primary activity of organization. One measure of centrality is the extent to which work of the leader department affects the final output of the organization. At a company such as Intel, which is heavy on technology, engineers have a degree of power because the organization depends on them to maintain the technical superiority over the production. In contrast to engineers at a company such as New Wave, where marketing is the name of the game, have a low degree of power. In these organizations, marketing are typically the most powerful group of employees. Centrality is associated with more power because it reflects contribution made to the organization. Last but not least, coping with uncertainty. The environment can change swiftly and create uncertainty and complexity. For leaders in the face of uncertainty, little information is available for leaders on appropriate course of action. Leaders in the departments that cope well with uncertainty will increase their power when making research. Personal actuality predict change in demand for new products. For example, they gain power and prestige because they have reduced critical uncertainty. Leaders in industrial relations departments may gain power by helping the organization deal with uncertainty created by labor union. As a leader, you can gain power by helping the organization deal with strategic contingencies. You can also use information to shape decision and action. Strive to become involved in the central activity of the organization and stay alert to ways you can help the organization cope with the critical uncertainty. These sources of power, interdependency, interdepartmental dependency, control over resources, centrality, and coping with uncertainty are also strategic contingencies that affect leader power in organization and leads to increased power. Increasing power through political activities. Another aspect of power is that it isn't enough to perform central activities or coping with organizational uncertainty. One effort must always be recognized as important by others. People who want to increase their power make sure their activities are visible and appreciated by others. Acquiring and the use of power is largely a political process. Politically skilled leaders strive to understand others' viewpoints, needs, desires, and goals, and use the understanding to influence people to act in ways that help the leader accomplish his or her goals for the team or the organization. Leaders at most organizations engage in some degree of political activity aimed at influencing government policies because government choices represent a critical source of uncertainty for business as well as non-profit organizations. Another political approach is called impression management, which means people seek to control how others perceive them from creating an image of great power as well as helping them gain power. However, this can also backfire if leaders are perceived as insensitive, dishonest, or one example of effective use of impression management is Steve Harrison, who at age 50 was afraid younger supervisors as well as subordinates might perceive him as behind the time. Not only does Harrison make sure that others know that he keeps up with certain business issues, but also he peppers his informal conversation with references as youthful hobbies and running and collecting electronic guitars. Followers use impression management too, as discussed in the section on strategic and strategies for managing up in chapter 7. For example, followers may seek feedback for their leaders as a way of creating a favorable impression and increasing their power, or in conversely, try to evade feedback in any attempt to avoid creating a negative impression. As a leader, you can use political activities to achieve important organizational goals. With these is uncertainty and degree about choices. You can develop connections with powerful people by volunteering for difficult projects and serving communities. I now hand you over to my colleague Stefan Tiervelas to continue with the presentation.
Thank you very much, Juma. So, with regard to what Juma just spoke about, and increasing power through political activity, anybody from the class can tell me if 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1. You can find anybody increasing power through political activity with them figures? That's just something to think about off the top of your head. Off the top of your head. But moving on. Tactics for a certain leader influence. The next issue is how leaders use their power to implement decisions, facilitate change, and pursue organizational goals. That is, leaders use power to influence others, which requires both skill and willingness. Much influence is interpersonal and one-on-one. This is a social influence, which involves coalitions, rewards, and inspiration. Other influences have broader appeal, such as to influence the organization as a whole, or to influence those outside the organization. However, not all attempts to use power result in actual influence. Some power moves are rejected by followers, particularly if they are seen to be self-serving. Leaders have to determine the best approach for using their power, that is, the approach that is likely to influence others by considering the individuals, groups, and situations involved. In addition, they understand the basic principles that can cause people to change their behavior or attitudes. Leaders frequently use a combination of influence strategies, and people who use a wider variety of tactics are typically perceived as having greater power, and influence. One survey of a few hundred leaders identified more than 4,000 different techniques by which leaders were able to influence others. However, the myriad of successful influence tactics used by leaders fall into basic categories of influence actions. Notice that most of these involve the use of personal power rather than relying solely on position power. Leaders frequently use a combination of influence strategies, and people use a wider variety of tactics are typically perceived as having greater power and influence. Here now we have the 7 principles for a certain leader influence. So these 7 principles are: use rational persuasion. Number 2, make people like you. Easier said than done. Number 3, rely on the rule of reciprocity. Number 4, develop allies. Number 5, ask for what you want. Be bold. Number 6, remember the principle of scarcity. And number 7, extend formal authority with expertise and credibility. Know your content. Question: of any of the 7 off the top of your head automatically, can you relate to yourself as any one of those 7? Anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just one we taken. Anybody could see themselves falling or have been portraying such traits? I refuse to believe that, but carrying on.
Yeah.
Ethical. Sorry? Hello?
Yeah, I was going to say, the using persuasion is one of the traits that I is actually utilized as a manager. Yeah, these are persuasion. I don't want to see myself as a person that could be easily related to.
Yeah.
So I try to use rational persuasion in most cases.
Yeah.
But that falls in my personality now to get things done.
That's nice, man. Just the way you come in suave, that voice just mellow and nice, you relax, like if you're sipping Hennessy while you're watching this. You understand? So I could believe that with regards to persuasion. Thank you very much, Mr. Blackman. So ethical consideration in using power and politics. Harry Truman once said that leadership is the ability to get people to do what they don't want to do and like it. His statement raises an important issue. Leadership is an opportunity to use power and influence to accomplish important organizational goals, but power can also be abused. Recall our earlier discussion of personalized versus socialized leaders. This distinction refers primarily to the approach to the use of power. Personalized leaders are typically selfish, impulsive, and exercise power for their own self-centered needs and interests rather than for the good of the organization. Socialized leaders exercise power in the service of higher goals that will benefit the others and the organization as a whole. One specific area in which the unethical use of power is of an increasing concern for organizations is sexual harassment. And remember, we touched extensively on this in last week's counseling session. People in organizations depend on one another and especially on leaders for many resources, including information, cooperation, and even their jobs. When access to resources seems to depend on granting sexual favors or putting up with sexually intimidating or threatening comments, the person in a dependent position is being personally violated, whether or not the leader actually withholds the resources. Partly in response to pressures from the courts, many organizations are developing policies and procedures that protect individuals from sexual harassment on the job and offer mechanisms for reporting complaints. Sexual harassment is not just unethical, it is illegal, and it is clear abuse of power. However, there are many other situations in organizations that are not so clear-cut, and leaders may sometimes have difficulty differentiating ethical from unethical uses of power and politics. This summarizes some criteria that can guide ethical actions. First and foremost is the question of whether the action is motivated by self-interest or whether it is consistent with the organization's goals. Once a leader answers this primary question, there are several other questions that can determine whether a potential influence action is ethical, including whether it respects the rights of individuals and groups affected by it, whether it meets the standards of fairness, and whether the leader would want others to behave in the same way. If a leader answers these questions honestly, they can serve as a guide to whether an intended act is ethical. In the complex world of organizations, there will always be situations that are difficult to interpret. The most important is for leaders to be aware of the ethical responsibilities of having power and take care to use their power to help rather than harm others. Leaders should think not in terms of getting their own way, but rather in terms of building long-term productive relationships that can achieve goals and benefit the entire organization. In summary, the two leadership styles that rely strongly on a leader's personal characteristics as a source of power and transformational and charismatic leadership. Transformational leaders also create an atmosphere of change, and they inspire followers not just to follow them personally, but to believe in the vision of organizational transformation. All leaders use power and politics to influence people to accomplish goals. One important consideration for leaders is how to use power and politics ethically and responsibly. So at this time, we'll pause to inquire if there are any questions from the class.
No questions from me, Theo.
Great.
No question from me, Theo.
Okay then. So, I have a question for you all. I'd like for you all to state one way in which you might increase your personal power. If you have a few ways, you could state that as well. But we really only need one way in which you believe you might increase your personal power.
You can go ahead, Theo.
Hi.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes?
I can think of a few, but I believe the most important one is being authentic.
Mm-hmm. I agree, a people person.
Exactly.
Another one is,
That's excellent. Much appreciated for the response. Anyone else?
yeah, another one is you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
believe in yourself. It's to believe in yourself.
That's another excellent point. Correct. Well, we do appreciate the responses that were given with regards to our references. If you would like a copy of today's presentation, we can make that available to you as well. And we'd like to thank you all for the time that you all took to spend with us this afternoon. Have a blessed day, everyone.